relating to business and commercial transactions in India. It is my great pleasure to invite all the dignitaries to the dais. I request our Honorable Registrar, Professor C.M. Rao, and Director of Academic Affairs and Research and Faculty in charge, Dr. Dayanand Murthy, to accompany all the dignitaries to the dais. Thank you, sir. Today, on this panel, we have with us Alagesh Sharma, Advocate on Record at the Supreme Court of India and Panel Counsel at Competition Commission of India. Mukul Sharma, Joint Director of Economics at CCI. Alagesh Sinha, Partner at Alagesh Sinha and Partners. And Dr. Dayanand Murthy, CP, Director of Academic Affairs and Research and Faculty in charge of Center for Business and Commercial Law at DSNM. Now we came to an end of preliminary rounds of 6th DSNMC competition. Now I request our Honorable Registrar, Professor C.M. Rao, to felicitate the judges of preliminary rounds. Ms. Niti Richarya. Ms. Roshni Nambori. Mr. Pushkar Ravishankar, sir. Mr. Rama Kirti, sir. Mr. Adarsh Chamoli, sir. Miss Delhi Chandana, ma'am. Mr. Sarad Jawaji, sir. Mr. Tahir Ashraf Siddiqui, sir. Next, Miss C.H. Sri Vidya, ma'am. Mr. Prasanna Swaminathan, sir. Mr. Akash Lamba, sir. Mr. Punyashlok Das, sir. Deepak Joshi, sir. Next, Dr. Priti K. Mokshakundam, ma'am. Thank you. Ananya, you can take over. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite my friend Sushi Sunanda to introduce all the panelists to the audience. Good afternoon, everyone. I take immense pleasure in introducing all our esteemed panelists to us. First, we have Mr. Mukul Sharma. Mr. Mukul Sharma is Joint Director Economics at the Competition Commission of India. He is an experienced economist with demonstrated history of working with the government sector. Mr. Sharma has completed his BA in Economics from SGTB Khalsa College and his Masters from Economics from Jamia Millia Islamia. He has worked as an assistant professor at Amity University. He has also worked as an officer of secondment at the Competition Bureau of Canada. He had joined the CCI in the year 2013 and is currently serving as a Joint Director Economics at the CCI. So, we welcome you to DSNL. Next, we have Mr. Alagesh Sinha. Mr. Sinha is a partner at Alagesh Sinha and Partners. He is graduated from Amity Law School, Delhi, and then joined Karanjawala and Company, where he represented India's top corporate houses. Mr. Sinha specializes in insurance law, arbitration, civil litigation, infrastructure law, corporate law, etc. He has keen interest in outer space law and has presented various papers and delivered various lectures on the same. So, we welcome you to DSNL. I'd like to introduce Mr. Avinash Sharma. He is an advocate on record at the Supreme Court of India and panel counsel at the Competition Commission of India. He has graduated from the Indraprastha University and has pursued his higher education from various esteemed institutions like the LLSIU Bangalore, the Hague Academy of International Law, the Netherlands, Harvard Law School, the United States, and Max Planck Institute of Comparative Public Law and International Law from Germany. He has delivered various guest lectures in various esteemed institutions in the Netherlands, China, Singapore, and Greece. He has a lot of his work published in various places like India, UK, Canada, etc. He is a specialist in competition law, arbitration law, and litigation. So, we are extremely delighted to have you here. Finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dyanand Murthy Sethi. He is the Director, Academic Affairs and Research at Damodaram Sanjeevaya National Law University. He has graduated from Mysore University and has obtained his LLM from Bangalore University. He has worked as an assistant professor at National Judicial Academy Bhopal, GNLU Gandhinagar, MS Ramaya College of Law, Bangalore, etc., before joining Damodaram Sanjeevaya National Law University. Now, I request the lead panelist to take over. Thank you.
Very good evening to all the members present here on the dais, Shri Mukul sir, Animesh and Avinash to my right. We are very pleased to organize this event because CBCL, as we have already introduced it, it's a Center for Business and Commercial Law which we have just started. I think this is the second program which we are organizing on behalf of the university. I think we should thank all the authorities concerned who have been supporting us in this behalf. Anyhow, we had a gap of 2 hours for the participants to look into their results. So probably I thought, or ultimately the team thought that we should not keep their brain free. And as experts are here, we believe that you will be enlightened upon their opinion and education and ultimately knowledge about what the subject is all about. I think this panel discussion was planned accordingly. I believe each one of you will be benefited out of this particular discussion where I have experts from all the field, including from the CCI, as a whole. Now, when it comes to the subject as such, the emergence of the law relating to competition law and what are the emerging areas in competition law, we all know that we are living in a digital knowledge area here. Now, when I speak of digital knowledge, you all know that today personal data has become a currency of today. Now, when we are in that mode, there are people, there are business people who are trying to accommodate and take advantage or the benefit out of this information available to the customers and to the businessmen as a whole. Now, how competition law goes with it is a question which has to be thought of. I think when we are looking into these things, probably shall we discuss one by one, or shall I just introduce and then I'll leave it to you? Fine.
Have some sort of discussion.
Yeah.
On some of these topics that
Right. Okay. So first thing is when I come to the competition law issue, 2002 was different, 2019 is different. Meaning thereby the traditional methods of how to actually look into competition law has changed a lot from 2002 to 2019, because competition law was completely thought of as a law subject, and today are we moving towards looking into as an economics rather than law in that particular sense? I think that's the first question I'll pose, and then probably leave the panelists to look into that particular aspect and how exactly it has affected the society as a whole when it comes to rather than looking as a law subject or looking into economics is better for competition commission as a whole. So I first seek your opinion and then.
if we give some opening thoughts on this. Am I audible at the back? Hi, am I audible at the back now? Yes. Taking forward from what Murthy sir has said, we are living in an ever-evolving society, especially in terms of what's happening in the marketplace. The world has gone through recession, and now there is enough discussion that some of these recessions may be hitting some of the developing countries. Some of the countries which were hoping to reach GDP figures at much higher rates to what is happening now. And in that context, how much role is a regime of competition is to play in a particular society, particularly here? So let me open with two questions that I could pose to my fellow panelists who are the subject specialists on this. Let me ask Kapil Sharma sir first. How can economics play a more enabling role, not in terms of holding people liable for the wrongs that they are committing, but in terms of stimulating more competition in the market? Is there a stronger role that economics can play? And then let me ask a follow-up question to Avinash there. Should competition regime in India be very strongly regulated through legal regulations and courts and decisions, or should there be a lot more play of economics in the way we are looking at competition regime in India?
Thank you, Alagesh. Firstly, I'd like to thank the university for inviting us. It's a beautiful place. I'm really loving it. Thank you. Coming to your question, I'm glad you asked this question. I'm willing to talk all day about it. Role of economics in competition law is integral to the very nature of the law. I think it's an economic law as such. And being a teacher of economics, having been a teacher of economics, I always used to say that economics is a study of choices. So we're making a choice every day. As consumers, we're making a choice as to which products to use. As producers, we're making a choice as to what prices to be charged for those products. And competition law is actually about all these choices made by various market players in the market. So yes, economics has a huge role to play, but having said that, competition law is a very beautiful mix of both the areas. So one cannot ignore one for another. Both have their own roles to play. Where economics comes in is understanding the markets, which is key to any competition case, I always say one thing, that each market is like a family. Every family has a story. Each market has a story. So even at the commission, whenever we're dealing with cases, we try to understand the story of the market. And understanding the story of the market, you need sound economics for doing that. So that's one thing. Secondly, as lawyers, we can have arguments, and lawyers can defend all arguments on both sides. But fair economics is handy, and particularly quantitative economics is handy. Is that numbers always tend to tell you a story, which is although economists also argue with one another, they can never stop doing that. But again, numbers tell you a very strong story, and a strong story to carry on with. So that is the role that economics and a sound knowledge of economics for anyone dealing with competition law can play.
Good afternoon. I'm Edward. Yes. I'm just echoing the thought. When I was pursuing my master's, so my master's was in law and economics. So it was an interdiscipline between two different stuff. And the competition law was my area of specialization. So any topic which I was studying in Europe was being taught by two persons. One an economist and another person by some lawyer or some law professor. So my sense is, without economics, competition law cannot function. You read any section of the Competition Act, all the concepts which we have, be it a cartelization, horizontal agreement, vertical agreement, privilege of dominance, merger, combination, reverse merger, amalgamation, anything which you are reading in the Competition Act, it's basically what? If you look from the economist perspective, it's basically just one thing: market. And all the firms are indulging into one thing: try to capture the market. Now, how to capture the market? Any market? It can be two ways. Either it could be a coordinated behavior of all the firms which are in the market. That could be one. So this coordinated behavior become cartelization, or say horizontal agreement, or any sort of things. Or if you are strong enough, then you indulge into unilateral behavior, that you are not bothered about what your competitor are doing, because you are so big, you are so dominant, that you can indulge into two kind of things. First, you try to exclude your competitor from the market, so which is you call exclusionary behavior. And once you have excluded, when all your competitor is out of the market, then you try to reap the benefit. Then you impose exploitative kind of practices which you have been doing. But the core of the entire concept is just remain one, be it any jurisdiction. That's why if you have to make a comparison between, say, US or EU or India or anything, it's basically a hybrid system. At the core of it, it's all about the market and how to capture that market. If you look at the Competition Act, it's not something new which this country has brought in. We have the old act of the MRTP Act, and you know the philosophy which was there, that being big was considered as a problem, being a dominant was considered as a problem. That law was good in 1950s and 60s because you don't have a privatization in many sectors. So you don't require as such competition, because if you have just one player, one government player in the market, so possibly you are not thinking that much from the angle of competition. But if you look at post 1990s, if you look at after the dissolution of USSR, you will find there is jump of the number of jurisdiction which is starting competition law. Entire Eastern Europe is adopting competition law post collapse of USSR. Post WTO, 1st January 1995, you find almost all major jurisdiction, now more than 120, has come out with competition law. So what basically it's trying to do. According to me, the competition law is nothing but trying to implement all the economic principles, economic rationale. How to implement that, that's why you need to have a law. There is no other justification. And all the concepts which you are hearing, efficiency, or I would say all kind of allocation and everything, it's a coming down to economics. So if you don't have a, I would say the basic idea about economics, it's a very difficult to understand this subject. That's number one. Number two is, it's not that it's the economist's job or the lawyer's job. I think the best way is how much one discipline is trying to understand from the other discipline. As a lawyer, I think I would have a better appreciation, I would have a better nuanced argument in court if I understand the perspective from the economist. Because actually these are the economic concepts. And the vice versa is also correct because of the reason that even if there is a good research, good decision by any competition regulator, they should have an idea that how this order is going to be treated by the tribunal or constitutional courts. Because ultimately you may have an excellent case, but then if the decision is being overturned by superior courts, then at the end of the day we are nowhere. Thank you.
Let me ask a follow-up question. First to Avinash, because of his background of both law and economics. Do you think that the evolving jurisprudence of competition in India now has been fair to the economic side? Is it the case that the competition regime has very strongly been dictated by judicial principles? And have you been fair to the economic side yet?
My sense is, yes. My sense is so far, even after almost now 18 years, we are not settled with this law. If you make a survey of understanding of this subject, if you go to any district court, if you ask 100 lawyers whether you are aware of this Competition Act, my sense is 80% will say no, we don't have any idea. So by and large, it has remained confined to those people who were practicing MRTP Act, the old act, and they found it as a new avatar. So you have a very restricted number of people who are aware about this subject. That's the number one. Number two is from 2002 to 2009. Somehow the commission was not functioning because of the tussle between executive and the judiciary. Because who is going to run this show? Whether the commission should be manpowered with bureaucrats, whether the commission should be manpowered with people from the retired judges or from the judiciary. So that was the tussle. At the end of it, in 2007, we have an amendment, and you are aware we created a tribunal in which it was decided the commission is going to be an expert of all kind of people, lawyers, bureaucrats, economists, jurists, all sorts of people. And then you are going to have a tribunal which is going to be headed by a former Supreme Court judge or former Chief Justice of any High Court. And then finally you are going to have a Supreme Court. Because the judiciary, to a great extent, rightly so, they believe adjudicatory function is the domain of the judiciary. But at the beginning, you require specialized body. That's what we have, the CCI. So from 2002 to 2007, the debate was revolving around these issues, not exactly whether we are going to have we are having a cartelization in this industry or we are having abuse of dominance in another industry. So nobody were talking about the substantive provisions, the implementation of this act. So somehow it started in 2009. It's going to face challenges like worldwide. Any competition authorities is facing all kind of challenges, right? Emerging area, you have an e-commerce, you have an online platform, how you are going to define the market, how you are going to have a two-sided effect, network. There are so many different issues. As far as the act is concerned, the philosophy remains the same. Perhaps you don't require any changes either in section 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, the substantive provisions. But yes, in order to regulate, for example, in 2002, nobody talked about that we are going to have cases of anti-competitive things in online market, or there is going to be abuse of dominance in e-commerce or some e-platform or the Google. All these cases nobody thought about in 2002. Even in Europe or let's say in the US, they never thought about it. But day by day, the moment you have a market dynamics which is changing almost every year, every month, so any regulator needs to respond to that. So it's not that we as such require any change in the law, but rather it would be the robust implementation of the existing provision. That's my sense.
Yes, the second point which I'll be raising here is two sub-issues come in here. The first one is, normally we say the competition law is for the benefit of the consumer at large. Now, has that concept changed today? Has that concept gone to an extent of saying it is public interest or the total interest which has to be protected rather than only the consumer interest here? The first issue which sub-issue I want to put in before the panel here is, are we changing now? Are we changing the competition law into consumer-oriented to a public interest-oriented, or what we call it as including the producers also being protected in law? In the sense, once again, the total interest is protected. The first one is that point of issue which we want to discuss today. The second point which I'll be raising here is the objective of competition authorities is basically to promote competition. Now, has this object backfired? When I say has it backfired, I mean to say that are we promoting inequality and unfairness by saying we are promoting competition? So these are the two things which I really want to know from the experts here. The first, has we changed from consumer interest to total interest? Second, is competition authorities really looking into the competition, free competition, or are we creating more inequalities and unfairness by looking into the trend of judgments of the CCI and the Supreme Court judgments? We are looking into whether in that mode we are going in. I think I'll leave it to the.
So let me take the first point on the interplay of consumer law vis-a-vis competition law. In that sense, our legislations are directly conflicting in some ways. We have a separate consumer law and we've got a separate law on competition. Competition ultimately is eventually to the idea of killing unfair competition or bringing unfair competition within the parameters of the act is to benefit the consumer. So therefore the first question is, what really is the difference between competition law and consumer law? This becomes far more blurred with the new consumer law which has come into place last year. The act is notified, but then the government has not brought in the rules, so the act has not been enforceable yet. The new consumer law also speaks about having a consumer protection council. And therefore, once that consumer protection council comes in, there will be open questions as to whether there will be any overlap between these two regulatory regimes. How that will play out, we will see how that goes. But the second part of your question is interlinked, and maybe that's what I intended to ask Mr. Kapil Sharma in the last point. Is it that in India, competition law, and especially the regulator, has been confined to examining unfair competition issues? Is there some role that the regulator can play to stimulate competition in an economy which is on a downturn?
Interesting question you asked about consumer and competition. I'll just give you an analogy here. So any regulator in the market, and more so the competition regulator, is like a referee. So in a football match, if a referee is running around for the whole 90 minutes, so he is ensuring that the game is played the way it should be played. So that is what any regulator does. And when the referee does that, it benefits both sides. So I would say that a competition regulator, by regulating competition in the market, by ensuring that there is more competition in the market, and the direct effects, the absolute direct effects of increased competition in the markets is reduced prices, increased quality, increased innovation. So ultimately, it benefits both the producers and the consumers. So although we may tend to think that yes, it is for the consumer, but ultimately increased competition in the market, increased choices for the consumer, ultimately leads to innovation in the market as well, and somehow leads to a good situation for both the producers and the consumers. So inefficient producers are weeded out because, let's say, they're not able to compete in the market, they're not able to innovate that much in the market. So more competition is good for the market. So market includes both the players, consumers, and the producers. So that is the answer to the first question. And Animesh, regarding your second question, can you please repeat?
Traditionally, we understand that the regulator is regulating unfair competition in the market. In a downturn economy, is there some role that a regulator can do to stimulate the competition?
I'm very glad that you asked it. So we tend to somehow oversee another aspect of competition law, which is advocacy. So, which is completely different from enforcement and is in a way complementary to that. So, advocacy is about sensitizing all stakeholders, including the government itself, in framing legislations which are governing sectors in the market to make those legislations competition compliant. So the Commission is doing a lot of work in that area. We're regularly in touch with central and state governments to refer their legislations to us to vet them from competition point of view. We're looking at legislations ourselves. So we have 17 impaneled institutions with us who are assigned legislations which have been suggested by the ministry. We're looking at any provisions which may be inadvertently be anti-competitive. So we're doing a lot of advocacy in that regard. So yes, the Commission has a huge role to play, and advocacy and enforcement go hand in hand.
Under the old regime of MRTP Act of 1969, you had a three concepts: monopolistic trade practices, restrictive, and unfair. So if you look at the new act, MTP with changes become your abuse of dominance. The restrictive trade practices, new avatar is anti-competitive agreement, section 3. UTP, if you remember, unfair trade practices, there used to be a lot of cases before MRTP Commission under the category of UTP. And then actually MRTP was somehow flooded with these kind of so-called individual consumer cases. So the philosophy under the, if you read the Raghavan committee which recommended this act, they said for the UTP, you already have the Consumer Protection Act now. So for the individual consumer cases in which a individual consumer is saying that there is a case of unfair trade practice, it should go to consumer courts. But if you look at section 4, if a dominant entity is indulging into unfair trade practices, the Commission has been receptive to taking those cases under the category of abuse of dominance. So if you look at the cases, for example, DLF, so it was a case of unfair trade practices apart from the other stuff under the category of abuse of dominance. So the Commission entertained and the Commission actually punished DLF. But then, if you look at post DLF of 2011, the CCI was flooded with all kind of cases against builder, and those builder was actually indulging into the same kind of practices what DLF was doing. But all those subsequent cases, the Commission rejected, saying that this is a case in which dominance has not been established. So in a geographical market of say Gurgaon, you say DLF is a dominant. So if one entity is already a dominant in the relevant market, and if the same practices is being adopted by a second or third or fourth player in the market, so it won't be a case of abuse of dominance. So those cases were actually not entertained by the Commission Of course, you have abuse of dominance cases in Ghaziabad or say other parts of the country. So a unfair trade practice which is being done by a dominant player, so that require examination under Section 4. But if the same practices is actually being done by a small player, that was not considered as a competition issue. That was considered as a pure consumer issue for which you already have the entire hierarchy of Consumer Protection Act.
Let me ask you a follow-up on that. Two specific examples. One, that now that the consumer courts have started examining the issue of dominance with a view of how you are able to negotiate unfair agreements. Secondly, the Maggie case. This was not a case where the litigant was an individual consumer. This is the government which goes to court and say, look, this is a big player in the market, and therefore we need to represent consumers. Do you think that with the coming of the Consumer Protection Council, there may be overlap still in such kind of cases?
My sense is consumer in any competition matter, consumer is a stakeholder for sure. But then the very philosophy of this act, and if you look at the classical debate between Chicago and the Harvard, these are the two prominent schools of thought in competition law. So they argue how much government should intervene. If the idea is to protect the interest of the consumer, you rightly said we have a Consumer Protection Act, the Consumer Council, and all these bodies. Competition Act, of course, the interest of the consumer is important, but then they are also looking at the interest of the producer. Consumer surplus, producer surplus, consumer welfare, producer welfare, and the total welfare. So the idea is to increase the pie. As long as a consumer is getting benefited, Chicago School says you need not interfere in the market. Because, for example, in today, if you have a Geo which is offering at a very cheap rate, we as a consumer say, okay, it's good for us because we are getting the same services at a cheaper price. But then the bigger picture is that at what cost? Whether the entity which is giving these kind of rates, whether it's indulging into some kind of predation, so then your mind would be whether it's a dominant. So from the competition angle, the perspective is altogether different because you start looking from the overall functioning in the market and you find who is the dominant player in the market and what kind of practices they are indulging into. It's exploitative, it's exclusionary, and whether in the short term consumer is getting benefited, but in the long term, when you don't have any other competitor in the market, then what will be the situation? What will be the scenario? Then you are coming to the next question. What's the objective of this act? To protect competitor, to protect producer, to promote competition, to protect what? Market. So these are the different objective or different consideration which any regulator always tries to figure out. So competition is always trying to looking into the overall functioning of the market. For the individualistic cases, we have the consumer things. Now with the coming up with this consumer council, I think the issue which you have raised, for example, Maggie, I think this is a remedy for these kind of things, according to me, is before that council or before the public interest is involved. But the public interest you won't find in Competition Act. I can give you just one example. In the US, the same merger between two entities, telecom number 1 company was acquiring number 4. That was given green signal by the FTC, saying that there is no competition concern, you go ahead with this merger. But then you have a Federal Communication Commission, which is having a different objective. They block that merger, saying that no, it's against the interest of national interest. So it's not in the interest of America because number 4 entity is having some connection with China. So the same transaction, different regulators are having a different yardstick, different consideration to either allow or not allow. So you may have a green signal from one regulator, but you may not have a green signal from the another regulator. And same thing applies to the competition law as well.
So, in the sense, there will always be an issue relating to sectorial regulators are concerned. The same thing can happen in India. For example, we have TRIA for as telecom regulatory authority, we have IRDA for insurance companies. Then we have SEBI as a sectorial authority. Now, how do you balance these things? How do you harmonize the statutory authorities? Basically, when it comes to competition issue, is a real issue. Whether we should one will be in conflict of what Sarah has taken an example, or should we harmoniously see or see that intercommunication happens when these kind of issues come in. For example, we have seen Competition Act saying that whenever there is a doubt, there is a possibility of CCI referring back to the CCI if some mergers and acquisitions are to be taken care of. I think that kind of harmonization is required. Even at the statute that provision is made, I believe that in India, to some extent, it can be regulated on that particular basis.
Knock the doors of the courts also, and courts have said that regulators who are regulating commerce in an industry cannot function as individuals. I think there has to be coordination between regulators.
I would say that both sectoral and the competition regulator have their own roles to play, and a role of one cannot be ignored for another. Sectoral regulators have a very specific role. It's more of a technical role because they are the domain experts of that particular sector, and they have to, as my fellow panelists pointed out, their horizon of issues that they look at is much wider than what the competition regulator looks at. Competition regulator has a very defined set of objectives to meet whenever we're looking at a case. We're looking at very specific thing, and that's competition advantage. When we're looking at mergers and acquisitions, we're looking at whether a merger or acquisition will adversely affect the market in terms of raising prices or in terms of decreasing quality or decreasing innovation. And that's a very, very specific area. That area may overlap with what the sectoral regulator is looking at, but ultimately, I think, as Alagesh pointed out, better communication is key for both sides, because ultimately we're all looking to work for the economy. So better communication is always at the heart of avoiding any issues or any clashes, potential clashes that may arise. But both have a role to play, and neither of the role is lesser than the other. In fact, both, I would say, and these are my personal views, I would say they're complementary.
The next point which I may raise to the panelists is, traditionally speaking, we have been going in a form-based assessment of competition issues. Now, are we changing into the effect-based assessment of the competitions? For example, normally we say that we used to measure by the market share. When an enterprise reaches a market share, we used to say that whether it has entered into a dominant position or not. That was the formal way of deciding in the 2002 Act. Now, today in the digital scenario, can we still stick into the mode of saying that once you reach a particular market share, are you still adopting that particular method, or you're going further and seeing what is the real effect on the consumer, or what is the real effect on the competition as such? Will you see all these things when you decide upon whether competition issues are really taken care of within the competition law? One, and ultimately connected to that, there is something called as a network effects. When I say effect test, and ultimately the network effects, and ultimately leading to what exactly is the digital platform, what we are speaking, or digital economy we are speaking, how exactly it will respond to the traditional mode with what we have to adopt today in this case. Yeah, please.
Right. So, as an economist, I would say that just market shares do not tell the story. It's as simple as that. I mentioned in my opening remarks that every market is a story. Every market is like a family. Every family is different, right? In one family, you have one person dominating the whole scenario. So when he says that, dinner will be served at 9 and everybody's going to be at the dinner table. So everybody is at the dinner table, right? Some of the families are different, right? Nobody bothers 9 p.m. I don't know. I have some other dinner to attend, right? So families are different. Same markets are different. The structure cannot define the market. Structure cannot tell you the story. Structure is just where you start from. What is going on in the market, understanding the stories of the market, and that is the real challenge. So understanding the story of the market, you've got to study how actually the market is behaving, who is dependent on the other, to what extent, how are the prices playing out, how is the output playing out, what are the capacity utilizations, how is the past conducts. So story of the market is much bigger than the market share. Sometimes a player with a small market share can really drive the market. Sometimes players, and we've seen all these cases. Sometimes players with substantial market shares their hands are tied in the way they can operate. So I think the key word that we have in competition law is that ability to act in favor of market forces. That is irrespective of market shares. Market shares is just the starting. I would just say and reiterate that again. Not to say that market shares should be ignored. They are a very good start. We can point out to a lot of other things, but things like prices, the movement of prices, ultimately shows you how the market is behaving. So it's a very nuanced approach that one has to take, and one has to understand I'll underline that line again, story of the market.
Just two quick things. It's a very important when competition authorities is going to intervene. I can just give you an example. It's not always that it's the competition authorities which is going to take a uniform view. Almost 30 years back, Boeing was acquiring a small aircraft company in the US. That merger was approved by the FTC within few days when the notification was made. But the same merger was blocked by the European Commission. And their justification was, after this proposed merger, Boeing will have much more weightage as compared to the Airbus, which is a European item. And then what we are finding is the same transaction is being blocked by Europe and saying go ahead by the US. And at the end of the day, you won't have any solution by these two competition authorities. The US Congress is passing a resolution against the European Commission, and the European Parliament is again trying to retaliate in the similar fashion. So it's not always all competition authorities is going to respond in the similar fashion. That's number one. Second thing is, it's also important when they are going to intervene. If you look at closely, be it a Google, be it a Facebook, be it any American icon, they have been investigated first by the European Commission. And Google and all these things started way back in 2009-10 in Europe. So there is accusation that European Commission was chasing American firms, and American competition authorities were not so proactive in changing their own icons. It's only when the European Commission is punishing XYZ penalty on these American champions, then other jurisdictions are following. There may be exception, but the general thing is the approach of different regulator has remained quite different. The statute book remains the same. The Sharma's Act or the 101 or 102 or the Indian Section 3, 4, 5, 6 remain the same substantively. But then the important is when you are intervening, whether it's the right time to intervene, whether you find that the market is very dynamic, the dynamics is changing every day. So it's also become something which we should have to keep in mind, that each authorities is having its own consideration to look into an issue.
I think I don't have anything to say in conflict to what has been said, except to say that there is really no solution to this kind of disparity in different geographic markets. They have their own biases, they have their own business interests, and I think it only makes the job of regulators very difficult. I think the only way this becomes better is there is more judicial consistency and if there are more economic parameters, as Mr. Sharma said, that when they are looking at particular industries, they are looking at them as families and not putting them in fixed mold boxes. And therefore, a little bit more of dynamism in looking at these issues are very important. But at the same time, there must be a lot of judicial consistency so that such kind of biases, personal individual biases in jurisdictions or markets or regulators, that can be stemmed by way of judicial consistency, in my opinion.
Because you have raised judicial consistency, I'll just put in a point here. How exactly we are looking into the distinction between the anti-competitive motives versus the business strategies of the businesses. So when you look into that, how judiciary has looked into whether we leave it to the strategy of the business, for example, what Ola is doing as to the pricing is concerned, or Google litigation we have seen, or for example, your moot court problem as to the online portal is concerned, how exactly they're dealing with the products. Should we leave it as a strategic business decision, or should we say it is anti-competitive, where the judiciary plays an important role, and see that should we stop them there? So how to distinguish and classify these differentiation, because somewhere the judiciary also has to put their restraint, leaving the people to decide upon. So how exactly the judiciary has taken a role here?
So I'll borrow the answer which Mr. Sharma said and I'm repeating it again. The problem with each of these industries are that they are very specific and you'll have to look at individual parameters. And therefore a stronger role is envisioned by the regulator, which is better positioned to look at economics of a particular industry than judiciary ever will be, which is maybe what was my first concern when we started the panel discussion. Has economics gotten a fair chance in development of competition regime in India? And to my opinion, no. I think there's a far nuanced, developed and pervasive role that economics has to play right at the beginning to look at individual industries before it is put up for judicial scrutiny. In that sense, Competition Act is more about the market than about judicial principles. And these factual aspects are not aspects for judicial scrutiny. These should be left purely in the domain of economists to consider, and the judicial role must be limited to interpreting the act. So last year we had a case law. In fact, last year's problem was largely dealt with this issue of search and seizure, where the issue was whether the act allows only search or it allows search and seizure. And there was a whole debate as to whether lawyers are becoming very technical in interpreting these laws. And I think those domains should still be with lawyers when it comes to that. But in terms of formation of individual facts or industries, in my opinion, I think economics has to play a larger role than what it is playing right now.
I fully agree with what has been said, because if the judiciary or the adjudicators are not aware of the principle, then sense is they won't be in a position to appreciate, they won't be in a position to apply. But at the same time, if the regulators are not aware of the principles which has been set by these constitutional authorities, constitutional courts, then even if you have a foolproof case, it's not going to survive in the test of judiciary. I can just give you an example. A few years back, I was representing CCI before the tribunal, and I don't want to disclose the name of any parties or anything. And the case was excellent as far as merit is concerned. It was indeed a case of anti-competitive stuff. But then what happened? The matter was heard in the commission by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, chairman of the commission. And then subsequently 2 members retired. And the judgment was being signed by 1, 2, 3 and 6 and 7 who joined the commission subsequently. So Justice Singhvi in tribunal asked me, Mr. Sharma, I am asking a question. Your matter was heard by the Supreme Court by 5-judge bench, and the judgment is being pronounced by 1, 3. Whether it's a tantamount to judicial propriety. And I was trying to defend the commission on the strength that under the act we have a concept of quorum. And if the quorum is 3, that would be sufficient. So I was trying to justify the stand that out of 5, if 3 people have signed the order, I think that's a good enough. We need not worry what was the thinking of 4th and 5th. But then the question from the judge was, what was the occasion for 6th and 7th to sign this order, who have never heard this matter? So he actually went not in the competition law, but the judicial principles, the principles of natural justice, the principle that who here should decide. So a judge, maybe a very conservative judge, a judge may have his own way of thinking. A judge, a Supreme Court judge will have a 30 to 40 years of experience as a High Court judge or as a lawyer or something. So he may not have any idea about competition law. He is concerned about the law, the fairness. So even if you have an excellent case of abuse of dominance of the cartel or XYZ, but if you are somewhere, if there is an infirmity in the process, that is good for the lawyers, but overall it's bad for the market. It's bad for the regulator, because having a foolproof case, but if you are not able in a position to finish it. And what actually happens? For these grounds, the orders are set aside, remanded back. Again, you come to the same conclusion following the process, and then your decision is actually upheld by the appellate tribunal and the court. So, economics is very important, but at the same time, it has to be understood that it has to be done in a way that it should be upheld by the tribunal and by the court subsequently. Otherwise, we are going to have all kind of undesirable outcome from the court.
So the next point which I'll be raising in, please.
Strong and personal views on this. I think it's a very fine balance that has to be played out at every level. So absolutely agree with you when you say that the legal principles of natural justice should be given that important role whenever we are investigating a case and finalizing and passing an order. I think that similarly at let's say the tribunal level or any other level in the judiciary, the importance of because as the biggest legal maxim I think is, although I'm not a legal expert at all, that justice delayed is justice denied. So ultimately we're dealing with markets. Ultimately we're dealing with anti-competitive behavior. And time is of essence. Right? So we have to balance both. The regulator has to balance the economics and the legal side. The courts have to balance it too. So I think ignorance of either, at either level, at any level, is not desirable. And that's my personal view.
I'll directly come to the subject aspect of it now. Basically, when we are looking into the abuse of dominant position, there is something called as exclusionary principle adopted by business or enterprise. Now, how do you balance these things? What is exclusionary principle adopted here? How the businesses actually do it so that it will not be amounting to anti-competitive, or it may amount to anti-competitiveness in this case. One. The second point which I may connect here is, today we are already referring to what is called as a threshold limit. Whenever it comes to the combinations under section 5 and 6 of the competition law, we speak about the threshold limit being fixed. Now, is that method today correct? Because when it comes to the digital platform or digital economy here today, there are some transactions which are not so covered under the threshold limit, but still it can have an impact on the market, impact on the economy as a whole. So will it be sticking to the threshold limit, or should we go something beyond that? What is based on a new principle which has been evolved as value-based, in the sense when I say that, will we go with the deal value in that particular sense, or the size of the deal? So in that particular sense, what is the measure which we normally look into, and how does the competition commission look into, and what is judiciary looking into in that aspect?
So again, it is very sector specific. But I'll hand this question over to Avinash, because he was telling me something very interesting on this exact point over lunch today.
I think that threshold, which is there under the Competition Act, there has been a lot of thought-making process, why we need to have this threshold. I can just give you an example. In 2009-10, if you remember, all pharmaceuticals company in this country was actually being sold to some foreign player, be it Daiichi, be it Daiichi is acquiring then Mexi, and then you have all these pharma companies. So there was a lot of concern by the domestic pharma industry that virtually each and every big pharma company of this country is being acquired by some foreign entity. So something should be done. So government at that time, in 2011, appointed Arun Maira Committee, who was at that time the member of the Planning Commission. And the recommendation of the Maira Committee was, irrespective of this threshold of the target or the acquirer, you must take approval from the Commission. But dispensing the threshold limit was never accepted by the government. And the idea is as follows. From the competition perspective, it's immaterial whether entity is Indian or entity is a foreign. As long as you have a 4, 5, 6, there is a proper competition in the pharma industry. It's make no sense to examine whether the entity which is in market is owned by the Japanese or the Americans or the Russians. So the competition authorities will look into from competition perspective. They are not concerned where they will be concerned with if there is a competition concern. If there are not good number of competitors in the market or the prices is increasing, if there is a case of unfair trade practice or there is a case of cartelization or something, certainly the competition authorities is going to look into. But in case of combinations, and combinations with merger, acquisition, amalgamation, everything, all kind of combination which you can think about. So as long as it's maintaining competition in the market, the sense has been you need a hands-on approach. You need not intervene in the market. Consideration may be somewhere else. For example, it's possible. For example, in the food industry, you think about the food safety and the say all those stuff. But then, from a competition regulator to intervene on the ground that your all entity is controlled by a foreigner, according to me, that's not the job of the competition authority. That may be the job of some other sectoral regulation or FDI or any XYZ regulation, but not the job of the competition authority to look into.
It's an interesting point. If I could reference Mr. Kapil Sharma, what does the regulator do? I mean, does it really get caught between deciding that there has to be some kind of stringent measure taken to stimulate the competition, or is it that the regulator can take a decision that sometimes we should let some smaller issues go, just so that free economics continue in the market? Is that a decision that actually falls on the regulator?
As a regulator, we get a variety of cases. Variety in terms of the sectors, variety in terms of the actual facts of the case. I mean, we're there to, we're guided by the law. So the law is clearly set up. So if something falls within the purview of the law, we're there to take action on it. Having said that, the resources of the commission are limited. And we also have to keep that in mind. So for any competition authority, not just